เข้าสู่งานอบรมในช่วงบ่ายครับในหัวข้อ ESG for IR ซึ่งจะช่วยให้นักลงทุนสัมพันธ์ครับได้มีความเข้าใจในเรื่องของแนวคิด ESG แนวโน้มในการลงทุนหุ้นที่มี ESG ทั้งในและต่างประเทศรวมถึงบทบาทของนักลงทุนสัมพันธ์ครับกับการสื่อสารในเรื่องของ ESG กับนักลงทุนโดยในช่วงแรกของวันนี้ครับจะเป็นการบรรยายในหัวข้อ Global and Regional ESG Landscape นะครับโดยได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรผู้มีความเชี่ยวชาญในเรื่องของ ESG โดยวิทยากรท่านนี้ครับทำงานที่ Bloomberg ในตำแหน่งของ Equity Market Specialist for ASEAN Region. So now it's time to get started. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Pamela Kustas.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pamela Kustas. I work at Bloomberg out of Singapore for the ASEAN region, and my focus is investor relations and ESG. So today is a good combination of two relevant groups. I'm going to talk about today some global and regional trends, how the reporting landscape is changing and affecting this region among others. For your company, how to see where you rank, look at some of the data that we have at Bloomberg, and then to also do a case study on why this is important and what the buy side looks at as well. So, and this will be relevant later when you hear from Nippon, the investment manager. Okay? So starting with global and regional trends. Right now, just in the USA alone, there's $9 trillion assets under management that are focused one way or another in the E, the S, or the G for environmental, social, and governance. That is 1/5 of AUM in the US. And just since Trump became president, there's been $383 million going into environmentally, socially, and governance-focused funds. So what that says is that despite his personal opinion that ESG is not relevant, it obviously is to the majority of investors. So at Bloomberg, we cover companies that report in their financials and annual statements disclosures representing those metrics that represent sustainable investing and, sustainable metrics for investors. And so this map shows you our coverage. Right now, we have coverage on 22% of listed companies and over 12,000 companies globally. And you can see the different regions of where we have the different groupings. We also have a lot of news, and not just at Bloomberg, at many places, there are more and more analysts covering ESG, not just in the news, but in their research. So just to explain this, Bloomberg has an intelligence macro research product, and it covers over 200 different industries or special thematic topics, and ESG is one of them. So the codes on the left just tell you, if you're a Bloomberg user, how to find this, but you can see a primer just looking this month into the rules and what's happening in climate change. Lets you get a nice snapshot of what might happen if US regulation might weaken. And investors' focus may intensify even more as a result. This is interesting because, as you know, China's president and the US president are getting together this in the upcoming days to discuss trade agreements, but also I am sure that climate will come up as well. So going from here on the right, you can see there are other topics that this analyst covers as well, and one is climate change. So we can drill in to these other bits on more specific information and see that President Trump has been delaying action on the climate changing policy. You know, at first he denied that it was a factual situation, and now due to pressure, they've postponed making any decisions until May. So while that is happening, China does plan to implement a national carbon trading system this year, and as you know, Europe is moving forward as well. So on a global level, there's a lot of pressure from different areas, and it's going to affect all different industries across the board. So this is just an example of how you can look at not just the company by company, but you can look at different industries as well across different reporting companies such as Sustainalytics, ISS, and RobecoSAM that will say, here's some industry relative metrics on where different industries stand. So you can look at different peer groups and see what's the reporting median across an industry that your company could be in. And then other ways to look at this is always by your region as well. So region and industry are the two ways that will probably help you do comparative analysis when promoting your own mission statement and your own practices. So another way through the Bloomberg system to look at information on ESG is we can type news on ESG or news on regulation, and this is just an example of how I could find information of news coming out. And why I think this is important is because in the past, and we were just speaking about this earlier before this session, when you heard about ESG, it was a nice to have. It was a nice compliment of, okay, this company tries to do the right things. But now it's definitely becoming more mission critical because now when there's bad news out, it really escalates how important this is to every company. And what I mean by that is when companies disclose more information around sustainability, it's proven that there's less chance of a corporate mishap. And of course, when there's less corporate mishaps, or less loose regulation within the companies, it's going to affect their performance. There's less likely to be any hiccup in your reporting season, in your reporting numbers, in your financials. So I don't need to tell you, I know you all know, a perfect example is Volkswagen in Europe. There was tons of news on Volkswagen, and when their emissions information was a farce, that stock plummeted, everyone exited, but also then everyone, all the asset managers then felt they had to defend themselves. Why were they invested in a company that did not have procedures in place? So that's where it impacts you on the investor relations side of how can you make a difference in your program for IR and be proactive in your practices so that you can promote the better part of what you're doing versus be at risk. And why I say this and look at this on Maybank appointing their first chairman that's female is that I'll skip forward for a second and then I'll come back to that other slide, is that Thailand is the leading region for gender diversity with its high proportion of women. It beats out the US. And a great example of why this can go far is the largest ETF with 30 million under assets that is focused on ESG is called Women in Leadership. And it's a Barclays ETF. It has 30 million US dollar asset under management. And that was among the top 2 reporting ETFs last year. Top 2 reporting ETFs with top performance last year. So the performance in that ETF, exchange traded fund, was over 9%. And their focus is investing in companies that have women either in a CEO position or on their board. The other ETF that had over 9% performance last year in 2016 was a environmental focused ETF, and that ETF focused on, and still does, focuses on companies with low carbon emissions. That's the second largest ETF with 4 million under assets. And just last year alone, for ETFs, the number of ESG-focused ETFs went from 16 to 23. Now, just to step aside a moment from ESG ETFs, just to give you the big picture, in the ETF space, money there now, assets under management, is 3.7 trillion. And then on average, there are 3 new ETFs being launched every day. So the fact that 1/3 of ESG-focused ETFs came in the last year tells you that there is tons of opportunity for upside growth in these ETFs. And they're going to be looking for companies that fit that profile. So there is a lot of upside for finding new investors in addition to active managers in this space. I'm just going to go back one slide for this to explain. In Asia, for ESG disclosure, the numbers are definitely going higher as far as companies reporting, but also this chart tells you from 2005 through 2015, the lines tell you how much regulation has been put in place in Asia. And so the top lines will be Japan, China, and India. They're leaders due to mandatory rules. But Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Singapore have changed their rules from voluntary, do the right thing, to mandatory required reporting. Now, why they're doing this is because they want the companies listed on their exchanges, just like you want your own company, to be competitive and comparable at a global level, not just here among your local peers. You need to think globally for investors that are looking for companies to invest in Thailand that have the criteria that are mandates for their investments. So that's why this makes a difference. Oops, sorry, skipping ahead here. So this picture, this screen really shows you that in Thailand, within the set, you can see across the universe, every sector has some leaders of disclosure. So I've grouped the companies in the set by industry, and I'm showing you the average across the average of the disclosure across that industry in these companies. I'm going to break that down a little easier in a graph for you, but just to show you that this is the type of information that buy-side Bloomberg users are looking at when they're making investment decisions. They're looking at sectors and looking at company levels to say, how much disclosure is there? What's the percentage of independent directors? What about GHG intensity in the right column? So this tool that I'm showing you has a lot of different tabs on it in the middle, and it just shows that beyond valuation and estimates, ESG is its own has its own set of metrics to look at and to take into consideration in their investment decision projects. So let me just put that in a graph for you, taking a step to a high-level look beyond the set in Asia. So in the neighborhood of ASEAN, disclosure by country, you can see which countries have the number of stocks. So Thailand is 55 per Bloomberg. Now, the set has a higher number, and Robeco Sam might also have different metrics than us. But our number is based on information that comes out of the financials. So it's based on transparency and disclosure. And what I want to show here is that although the 5 countries are pretty close, if you look at the bottom part of this chart, or the bottom chart in the bottom half of this screen, 2014 is yellow, and to 2015 as far as improvement. So you can see there wasn't a big change because, again, a lot of this reporting was voluntary. However, if you look at the average score among the companies within each country, you see that Thailand has the best average disclosure score among companies reporting. So why am I telling you this? Because this is a good story top down that Thailand's a good story, a good place to invest, and then your company is where you get to tell your own mission statement and why your practices fit this story. Looking a little further, if I break it down, I'm looking at environmental disclosure in green, social disclosure in blue, and governance in orange. So you can see, again, across the board, even if we break it out, Thailand is doing the best. Now, within Thailand, if you want to look at industries and know how you compare against your peers, you can take a look, and what I did here was I went back to adding the full disclosure score in yellow among the segregated metrics of environmental, social, and governance. And so then you can see on an aggregated level, materials is the best, followed by utilities. But the top sectors in Thailand are materials, utilities, energy, and consumer staples. Healthcare and technology have a bit of work to do. So this is where you can go back and you can look at your peers' financials, and you can also look at their annual reports or their quarterly presentations, and that's information, those transcripts are information we have on Bloomberg, to see what are they saying, what are they focused on going forward, what is their outlook, and what are they telling their investors that I should be doing as well. So when you look at those transcripts of your peers, or you look at information, then the next question becomes, how to report? What should I be saying? So just using an example, because Singapore is a little ahead of Thailand as far as the requirements, the SGX, Sets Neighbor, requires 5 components as of February. And how this works is, with your annuals in 2016, at the end of 2016, you have 5 months to report. And if you don't report any information at all, you need to explain that. So their catchphrase is comply or explain. So these are the components of complying or explaining. So first they have to figure out what material ESG factors affect their company. Obviously, if you're an energy company, you're going to have a lot more on your list than, let's say, you're a bank that might have more governance with regulation. But then you want to look at and disclose the policies your company has, the practices and performance, set some targets for your company that are achievable, and then look at the sustainability reporting framework and what global companies are doing as well, so that you are comparable on that level when it comes to number 5, your board statements. So material ESG factors. A statistical study based on 55 APAC companies showed that the most disclosed themes were diversity, supply chain, energy, occupational safety, and health. And we break this out across the board as far as globally ESG disclosure from companies. I'm sure that all of you have heard more and more about diversity and companies that don't have enough women in the marketplace or minorities. And that goes all the way up the chain to the mega caps in the US, where Google was called out for that, for not having enough women or minorities in their firm, and they needed to address it. And that's where, as an IR, you get into crisis management, and you don't want to be on your heels and have someone ask you, where is your information on ESG? You want to be proactive so that you're telling the story and, again, disclosing the information before people are coming to dig it out from you, so that you're showing you are a transparent company with good practices. Ranking of ESG disclosure by sectors. This is where, depending on the type of company you have or that you're running the IR department for, you can really get granular. So this will show the ranking of ESG disclosure, and the blue across the board will say how much diversity was mentioned across these different sectors. What about waste and efficiency, environmental compliance? In red, we have supply chain. In green, we have energy disclosures. And then next after that is water, labor practices, occupational safety and hazard, emissions, and responsibility for product and services. That sounds like a lot. I just gave you a lot of jargon. But this is the type of breakdown for ranking of ESG disclosure that you have to look at when you have to decide out of all these different topics that I mentioned, which is the most important to your company? What fits your realm? Again, it's going to depend on what sector you're in, what your outlook is, and who your comparative peers are when you're doing this reporting. You want to be in accordance with those peers and disclose as much breakdown and transparency as you possibly can. So then for policies, practices, and performance, this is actually a snapshot from Bloomberg where you can put your company in our template, and based on your industry, we can recommend information to you and say, this is what you should be reporting. Should you be reporting certain environmental information? Or, for example, I know this is too small for you all to see, but under human rights, this would apply to almost every company. You know, number of child labor incidents, number of discrimination incidents, number of, work-related injuries, and then board member information versus, for example, information on, recycling and water recycling and so forth in the energy space. So every company wants to report as much as possible, but there are going to be certain areas that, we will say across the board, if your eyesight's really good, that you can see where we say, yes, report it, yes, report it, yes, report it, versus at the bottom, employee training, there are a lot of no's there. That's nice to have, but I wouldn't say that affects, the training that you have for your employees necessarily fits into ESG directly.